Good morning, room 7 kids. How you doing? Today is the 10th anniversary of the first time I ran the Boston Marathon. So let's see if I can get the right sleeve here. So in 2010, I ran my first Boston Marathon. And so what that is, it's a marathon, which is 26.2 miles, and you have to qualify for it. So that means that you have to run a marathon before that at a time for your age group that is fast enough so you get in. So it's kind of an honor to run it. I've done it 5 times. I'm tooting my own horn. Okay, but anyway, it's the 10th year since the first time I did it. And I wasn't planning on doing it this year. So instead I did my 100 miles at school as my goal. And I was going to run a half marathon on my birthday, but I think that one's going to be canceled, so I might have to run that on my own. But anyway, so happy Boston Marathon Day. And we're going to go ahead and do a little read aloud for you. I have 2 chapters to read, so I better stop talking and get right to work, okay? So we were at the climax of the story. It was pouring rain. She had just had her party, and it started raining. And we know what happens when it starts to rain. She realized Winn-Dixie was gone. So here we go. Chapter 24. Me and the preacher started walking and calling Winn-Dixie's name. I was glad it was raining so hard because it made it easy to cry. I cried and cried and cried the whole time I was calling for Winn-Dixie. Winn-Dixie, I screamed. Winn-Dixie, the preacher shouted. And then he whistled loud and long, but Winn-Dixie didn't show up. We walked all through downtown. We walked past the Dewberry's house, the Herman W. Block Memorial Library, and Sweetie Pie's yellow house, and Gertrude's Pets. We walked out to the Friendly Corners trailer park and looked underneath our trailer. We walked all the way out to the Open Arms Baptist Church of Naomi. We walked past the railroad tracks right down to Highway 50. Cars were rushing past us, and their taillights glowed red like mean eyes staring at us. Daddy, I said, Daddy, what if he got run over? Opal, the preacher said, we can't worry about what might have happened. All we can do is keep looking. We walked and walked. In my head, I started on a list of 10 things that I knew about Winn-Dixie, 10 things I could write on a big old poster and put up around the neighborhood, things that would help people look for him. Number 1 was that he had a pathological fear of thunderstorms. Number 2 was he liked to smile using all his teeth. Number 3 was he could run fast. Number 4 was he snored. Number 5 was that he could catch mice without squishing them to death. Number 6 was he liked to meet people. Number 7 was he liked to eat peanut butter. Number 8 was he couldn't stand to be left alone. Number 9 was he liked to sit on couches and sleep in beds. Number 10 was he didn't mind going to church. I kept on going over and over the list in my head. I memorized it the same way I'd memorized the list of 10 things about my mama. I memorized it so if I didn't find him, I would have some part of him to hold on to. But at the same time, I thought of something I had never thought of before, and that was the list of things that couldn't even begin to show somebody the real Winn-Dixie, just like a list of 10 things couldn't ever get me to know my mama. And that thinking about that made me cry even more. Me and the preacher looked for a long time, and finally he said we had to quit. But Daddy, I said, Winn-Dixie's out there somewhere. We can't just leave him. Opal, the preacher said, we have looked and we've looked, and there's only so much looking we can do. I can't believe you're going to give up, I told him. Opal, the preacher said, rubbing his nose, don't argue with me. I stood and stared at him. The rain had let up some. It was mostly a drizzle now. It's time to head back, the preacher said. No, I told him. You go ahead and go, but I'm gonna keep on looking. Opal, the preacher said in a real soft voice, it's time to give up. You always give up, I shouted. You're always pulling your head inside your stupid old turtle shell. I bet you didn't even go out looking for my mama when she left. I bet you just let her run off, too. Baby, the preacher said, I couldn't stop her. I tried. Don't you think I wanted her to stay, too? Don't you think I miss her every day? He spread his arms out wide, then dropped them to his sides. I tried, he said. I tried. Then he did something I couldn't believe. He started to cry. The preacher was crying. His shoulders were moving up and down, and he was making snuffy noises. And don't believe that losing Winn-Dixie doesn't upset me just as much as it upsets you, he said. I love that dog. I love him too. Daddy, I said. I went and wrapped my arms around his waist. He was crying hard, and he was shaken. It's all right, I told him. It's okay. Shh, I said to him, like he was a scared little kid. Everything will be okay. We stood there hugging and rocking back and forth, and after a while the preacher stopped shaking, and I still held on to him, and I finally got the nerve to ask the question I wanted to ask. Do you think she ever's going to come back? I whispered. No, the preacher said, no, I don't. I've hoped and I prayed and I've dreamed about it for years, but I don't think she'll ever come back. Gloria says that you can't hold on to anything, that you can only love what you've got while you've got it. She's right, the preacher said. Gloria Dump is right. I'm not ready to let Winn-Dixie go, I said. I had forgotten all about him for a minute. What with thinking about my mom and all. We'll keep on looking, said the preacher. The two of us will keep looking for him. But do you know what? I just realized something, India Opal. When I told you that your mama took everything with her, I forgot one thing, one very important thing that she left behind. What? I asked. You, he said. Thank God, your mama left me you. He hugged me tighter. I'm glad I've got you too, I told him, and I meant it. I took hold of his hand, and we started walking back into town, calling and whistling for Winn-Dixie the whole way. Chapter 25. We heard the music before we even got to Gloria Dump's house. We heard it almost a block away. It was guitar playing and singing and clapping. I wonder what's going on, my father said. He walked up Gloria's sidewalk and around back, through her yard and into her kitchen. What we saw was Otis playing his guitar and Miss Franny and Gloria sitting there smiling and singing and Gloria holding Sweetie Pie in her lap. Amanda and Dunlap and Stevie were sitting on the kitchen floor clapping along and having the best possible time. Even Amanda was smiling. I couldn't believe they were so happy when Winn-Dixie was missing. We didn't find him, I shouted to them. The music stopped and Gloria Dump looked at me and said, Child, we know you didn't find him. You didn't find him because he was right here all along. She took her cane and she poked at something under her chair. Come on out of there, she said. There was a snuffle and a sigh. He's asleep, she said. He's plumb wore out. She poked around with her cane again, and Winn-Dixie stood up from underneath her chair and yawned. Relief. Winn-Dixie, I hollered. Dog! Gertrude squawked. Winn-Dixie wagged his tail and showed me all his teeth and sneezed. I went pushing past everybody. I dropped to the floor and I wrapped my arms around him. Where have you been? I asked him. He yawned again. How did you find him? I asked. Now there's a story, said Miss Franny. Gloria, why don't you tell it? Well, said Gloria Dump, we all was just sitting around waiting for you two. And after I convinced these Dewberry boys that I ain't no scary witch, all full of spells and potions. She ain't no witch, Stevie said. He shook his bald head. He looked kind of disappointed. Nah, said Dunlap, she ain't. If she was, she would have turned us into toads by now, he grinned. I could have told you that she wasn't a witch. Witches don't exist, said Amanda. They are just myths. All right now, said Gloria. What happened was we got through all them witchery things, and then Franny said, why don't we have a little music while we wait for the two to get back? And so Otis played his guitar, and woo-wee! There ain't a song he don't know. And if you don't know it, he can pick it right quick if you hum it for him. He has a gift. Gloria stopped and smiled over at Otis, and he smiled back. He looked all lit up from the inside. "Tell us what happened," Sweetie Pie said. "Tell about the dog." "So," said Gloria, "Franny and me, we started thinking about all these songs we knew from when we was girls. We got Otis to play them, and we started singing them and teaching the whole world all the words to these children. And then somebody sneezed. Sweetie Pie shouted. "That's right," said Gloria. "Somebody sneezed, and it wasn't none of us. So we looked around, wondering who did, thinking that maybe we got a burglar in the house. We looked around, and we didn't see nothing. So we started into singing again. And sure enough, there was another big achoo. Sounded like it was coming from my bedroom. So I sent Otis in there. I said, 'Otis, go on in there and see who's sneezing.' So Otis went. And do you know what he found?" I shook my head. "Winn-Dixie," shouted Sweetie Pie. "That dog of yours was all hid underneath my bed, squeezed under there like the whole world was about to end. But he was smiling like a fool every time he heard Otis play the guitar, smiling so hard he sneezed." My daddy laughed. "Is it true?" Miss Franny said. "Is it the truth?" said Stevie. Dunlap nodded and smiled right at me. "So," Glory Dump said, "Otis played his guitar right to that dog, and a little bit at a time Winn-Dixie came creeping out from underneath the bed. He was covered in dust," said Amanda. "He looked like a ghost," said Dunlap. "Yeah," said Sweetie Pie, "just like a ghost." "Mm-hmm," said Gloria. "Looked just like a ghost. Anyway, the storm stopped after a while, and your dog settled in under my chair and fell asleep, and that's where he's been ever since, just waiting on you to come back and find him." "Winn-Dixie," I said. I hugged him so tight he wheezed. "We were out there whistling and calling for you, and you were right here all along. Thank you," I said to everybody. "Well," said Gloria Dump, we didn't do nothing. We just sat here and waited and sang some songs. We all got to be friends. Now the punch ain't nothing but water, and the egg salad sandwich got tore up by the rain. You got to eat them with a spoon if you want egg salad, but we got pickles to eat and litmus lozenges, and we still got a party going on." My daddy pulled out a kitchen chair and sat down. "Otis," he said, "do you know any hymns?" "I know some," said Otis. "You hum it," said Miss Franny, nodding her head, "and he'll play it." So my daddy started humming something. Otis started picking it out on his guitar, and Winn-Dixie wagged his tail and lay back down underneath Gloria's chair. I looked around the room at all the different faces, and I felt my heart swell up inside of me with pure happiness. "I'll be back in a minute," I said, but they were all singing now and laughing, and Winn-Dixie was snoring, so no one heard me. Okay, friends. I'll see you at 9 o'clock in our Zoom.